here we are. Ben Wander, A Case of Distrust. Distrust. It's a really neat point-and-click film noir inspired game. I awoke in my desk chair. Across from me were his piercing amber eyes. They surprised me at first, but I should have known he'd be there. I stretched and said mid-yawn, "Not very nice to sneak into a sleeping woman's apartment," but his stare just continued. I laughed at his glare. I'd seen San Francisco's shrewd thugs, hardened cops, and deadly politicians, but none could ever match that gaze. I knew I didn't have what he wanted. Reaching into my coat, I took out my knife and flicked it open. I held the knife steady. While staring at him. "Look," I said, nodding toward the desk. "That's all there is. Take it or leave it. But a detective knows when she's beat. And I knew then. He wanted to search the place, and that's what he would do." I sighed, knowing my weakness for his type. "All right," I said. "Let's look." He let out a gleeful meow in victory. I cut a piece of my apple that the cat had rejected. "Always the sore winner," I jabbed, but I was smiling too, because I was telling the truth. There was absolutely no other food in my apartment. What a twist right off the bat! Oh, this mystery, it's gonna be good. You just know it. The cat often dropped by to scavenge. He made a lot of noise when he thought I was holding out on him, but right now, the place was clean empty. No food anywhere. I had to prove it to him. The cat had waltzed into my apartment a few years earlier. He kept coming back, though there was rarely a morsel to eat. He'd continue his loud meowing until I proved to him that the place was empty of food. Let's talk to the cat. "It doesn't matter how doe-eyed you are, cutie pie. We've got no food around," I told him. He licked his chops and looked at me. Apparently, he still didn't believe that. I needed to contradict him somehow, to show him something in the apartment that would prove it was empty of food. Alright, let's look. That lamp had belonged to my Uncle Lewis. He'd been an SFPD officer, one who argued policewomen could be good detectives, even while the others jeered at me. I knew he'd been right, but my current workload didn't help that claim. I thought about Lewis more often than I wanted. I was lousy at handling the emotions behind those thoughts. Oh? I kept a small statue underneath the side table. It had been police evidence in a crime, and its owner hadn't wanted it back. I took a shine to it, so I snagged it for myself on my way out of the apartment. Was it like a murder weapon? It looks like a statue. Could be used for bludgeoning. Aha! The regular white icebox, tinged yellow with age, half-blocked the kitchen doorway. My income rarely kept much stocked in it, and right now it was empty. And I think... oh, what's this? I had taken copies of old murder cases from the SFPD records when I'd left. I loved reading through them, even though my own contributions were minimal. At that time, I longed for those types of jobs. The truth was, any work was hard to come by. That's hard to find for a female detective. Oh. Doing my best. We'll get into it. Notes. Sweet. Okay, so we got proof, the empty icebox. Okay, cat. Let's talk to you. Oh, I love the art style of this game. It's so cool. Contradict! Evidence! This is such a cute little way to do a tutorial, too. Okay, we got this. I opened the icebox so the cat could see inside. Empty, I told him. The cat looked quizzically at the opened door, then back at me. "Sorry, fella, there's no grub in there for me either." He stared at me with eyes as disappointed as I felt. Those big yellows always got to my soul. Thoughts of my family filled my head. But never mind those thoughts. At the time, they were distractions. I moved on from them. A loud meow from the cat snapped my thoughts back into the moment. I took a deep breath and grinned back at him. "Guess you can scram now," I said. "Nobody's going to come knocking with food for you, fella." Food? There immediately came a banging on the front door. Beyond a nuisance, this cat was psychic too. "You order out?" I asked him. Nice. It's snapping. I won't snap along with it, that's annoying. But in the doorway was the regrettably familiar face of Connor Green. I looked past him, peering left and right into the hallway. I heard a woman's heels marching down the carpeted stairs, but otherwise the building was silent and empty. Evidently, Green had come alone. He stared at me through the doorway with a coy smile. "Well, ain't you gonna invite me inside?" I started closing the door, but he stuck out a foot to stop me. "Hey now," he chided. "Foul way to treat a customer, Malone." So that was his angle, hiring me as a detective. I wondered what a bootlegger would need with a private eye, but he answered without my prompt. "I'll make this quick. I can't take this to the hog house or the pigs would laugh me out. And other dicks just aren't as tempting." His grin widened. "Thought this was going to be quick," I said, and I started rolling a cigarette. It wasn't quick, and I'd already rolled and lighted a second smoke when Green finally finished his story. I noted the important bits in my book. It had started with a letter slipped under his door in a white envelope. The envelope contained a single typewritten leaf, which he handed to me. It read, "End your game, or we'll end you." It had no signature, instead ending with only a small scribble in the bottom right corner that resembled a black hand. Green had a lead on a new rum-running scheme. A connection from Vancouver, he'd given a sample to Tiny Paul, the gangster who ran the Tin Spoon Speakeasy for mob boss Jerry Fieri. Jerry Fieri? Guy Fieri. Welcome to Diner, Drive-Ins, and Dives. Anyway, they'd agreed to buy in for more. Green surmised the letter was about his rum running. He suspected Redstone Stable, another bootlegger, of sending the letter. He told me that Stable ran a barber shop during the day and gave me the address. Green needed to know who the threat was from. He'd get Paul's gang to deal with him and continue his scheme to get rich. "If I go snooping myself," he concluded, "folks see I'm not trusting people. No trust leads to no customers. I need to play it low key, which is where you come in." I'm trying to do like New Yorker style, but clearly not great with accents. I raised an eyebrow and stared at him through the cigarette smoke. Something in his yarn was still twisted. He must have noticed my reticence, because he said, "You know, I'd worked closely with Lewis. I'm sure he'd want to protect me as much as any other victim." Oh, how dare you tear at her heartstrings, my uncle. I was still searching for answers after his death. He'd been a man obsessed with helping victims and bringing justice to those beyond salvation. With that ethos, I never understood how he could have taken his own life. Those thoughts haunted me. I had quit the SFPD and started my own practice, taking his philosophy. Was Green worth my time? Would he be worth Lewis's? Green had tipped off my uncle in a few cases. I wondered if that was enough to warrant my protection. Before I could think past my headache, he threw a bill in my lap. "Keep the C note as a retainer. And don't worry about getting in touch. I'll find you later for a chat." He turned down the hallway and I let him go. If he was willing to give me $100 with no commitment, I wouldn't stop him. Damn, that's a lot of money. I turned back to the apartment, still confused about the whole story. My headache wasn't helping either. Whether I lacked clarity Whenever I lacked clarity, a trip to Southern Coffee was usually the cure. Oh, let's go. I'd mounted a gold plate on the outside that read PC Malone, Private Investigator. Let's leave. There was only one place I needed to go to clear my head. Southern Coffee. Southern Coffee was a basement dive. It wasn't modern, hip, or even busy, and it was my favorite place to down some paint, especially in the company of the best bartender in the city. Go here! I hailed a driver, gave him the address, and stepped through the back door. I debated talking with the driver. Don't! Ugh. Talking to people. Can't even imagine. I peered out the window until we arrived. Southern Coffee was an automat diner. Ethel Burgess, the lone waitress, was friendly to help with any inquiry. Of course, if you winked at her right, she'd show you the way to the downstairs toilet, where Frankie played bathroom attendant. He'll suck your dick! Southern Coffee had the distinct feeling of home. The familiar smell of mold in that old basement was enough to put a grin on my face. Frankie tended bar at Southern Coffee. Though it wasn't his place, I'd never caught whiff of the real owners. They trusted Frankie to do what he did best. Oh, what voice does he have? Is he like stereotypical, like classy butler voice? I said, "'Lo, Frankie," and was met with a smile and a grunt from Franklin Ernest Conway. He was a big fella, both wide and tall, and must have been a little over 50. He had a round head, kind brown eyes, and a cropped ring of gray hair encircling an otherwise bald scalp. His voice had a warm timbre, and that complemented the tobacco and whiskey smells of his speakeasy. I sat at the bar. What voice does he have? "You got the spooks, PC?" he asked. You're worn as a catcher's mitt." I suppose my exhaustion showed. I won $100 for nothing, and I can't let it go. I told Frankie about the case, the threatening letter sent to Connor Green, how he assumed it was related to his bootlegging, and his suspicion of Redstone Stable. The story took longer than I'd wanted, Frankie showing genuine interest by asking many questions. When I finished, he threw me the whiskey sour he'd been stirring. I took a large gulp and gave a sigh as thanks. "Well, Green's case is better than most of what you're given," he said with some enthusiasm. At least it's not more of that adultery bunk." "Sure," I replied, but I started with a goal in mind. What's the point in helping a man like Green? Frankie clicked his tongue on his teeth. "Lawyer or priest, why does it matter? Let me tell you. Are the clients you have now the types you want to help?" I admitted they weren't. I told him that I'd wanted more from my detecting life. "It could be that Green's case shoots your career forward, Malone." I sighed and stared down at my drink. But my daze was interrupted by the basement door opening then slamming shut. A small, blustering woman began marching towards me. She was wearing a light blue cloche, I believe it's pronounced, the flapper hat. A light blue cloche hat with a gray ribbon tilted back on her head. A scarf of similar blue draped around her neck, but I was startled by what she wore under it, a gray trench coat that looked too large for her frame. It was exactly like the one that had belonged to Lewis. She hurled insults at me a while. All I could do was sit and take it until she ran out of gas and started breathing heavily. I set my drink on the bar and looked her in the eyes. I studied her features more thoroughly. It was plain she was a knockout, now that she'd finished shrieking, Beyond the latest blush and lipstick, she had the natural soft skin and bright eyes perpetually desired by the opposite sex. While I was eyeing her, she caught her breath and restarted her tirade. I'm the wife of that bum who sneaks into your bed. Her accent is just gonna match his, Mr. Green. I asked, the cat? But humor wasn't her angle, and she launched into another poetic stanza. And he finally left your sty this morning, she finally ended. And that's when I gathered she was Connor Green's wife. Okay, yeah, I kind of spoiled. I've played like 5 minutes into this game before, so I know who she is. Mrs. Green, I'm a PI, not a homewrecker. And I don't think your husband in his line of business would want to bed a dick anyhow. Her look was pure incredulity. A woman in that line of work? She questions. I don't believe it. I don't owe you anything. You don't have to believe it, I told her. But now you know my story. I want to know yours. Why are you here, Mrs. Green? Between shouted obscenities, I understood part of the story. Apparently, she had seen her husband leave my apartment and, distraught, she had followed me all the way to Frankie's basement to confront me. I have tea here because I knew this game was gonna be a whole lot of talking. She ended her tirade with waterworks, the tears ruining whatever rouge she had on her face. Frankie, ever chivalrous to a dimpled girl, came around the bar and held her up. Now that's all right, Miss Green. Why don't I hail you a cab and send you on your back home? Send you on back home. She agreed, and they walked together up the stairs. When Frankie returned, I said to him, "You turn night real quick." He snorted a laugh. Aw, hell. We can't have that siren in here. With a torture yelling like that, every street bugger would come to her rescue. Mrs. Green is a torch singer? Well, I learned she was Mrs. Connor Green just now, when she came in here. I'd only seen her as Lil Fanny, singing lead for the jazz band at the Tin Spoon. The Tin Spoon, I said. Tiny Paul's joint? That's where Green is selling his liquor. Say, you think that's where she met her husband? I laughed. You're the real sleuth, Frankie. He made a sarcastic bow. I shook my head. You're telling me you escorted our little torture out just to avoid a bit of hot water. Frankie flushed and said, What are you talking about, Miss Malone? I was never good with emotions, but it was plain that Frankie had instantly fallen for the girl. So what if I had more to squeeze out of her? I asked. What more could you possibly want from Lil Fanny? She can't have anything to do with Green's mess. I guess this is gonna teach me that I can't just make wild accusations. Oh, haha! Contradiction! Did you... Objection! This is gonna quickly turn into noir Phoenix Wright. Did you notice her clothes? That gray trench, maybe? I posed to him. It looked a bit large on her, don't you think? I thought she looked lovely, he said. That trench, I continued, belonged to Lewis. Frankie's eyes widened. So that scumbag Green might actually have been close to your uncle, he exclaimed. Or she might have. Either way, it's not total bunk. I stood up from the bar stool. What had just happened was quite the ruckus. It seemed like my cue to move along. Frankie had a bond with that old shaker at the end of the bar. I was surprised he hadn't named it. He could sling a mean drink, though he'd only use the good liquor if he liked you. Frankie liked me. Well, good for you. I grabbed the wine bottle on the bar and examined its label. It featured a picture of grapes and the words, sacramental use only. Frankie looked at me with a spark in his eye. Go ahead, he said. Give it a swig. I'll drink it, sure. I grabbed the half-empty glass that had been next to the bottle and swirled some of its contents between my gums. A bit spicy, ain't it? Frankie asked. It's good, I nodded, and gulped the rest down. It'll cost you, too, he said with a smile and grabbed the bottle from me, turning it through his hands. Rabbis charge more than a nickel for this beauty. Only this type of Napa wine is made from that Zinfandel grape. It has a unique aroma. I'd been trying to learn more about wine. Seemed everyone knew their stuff but me. I noted what Frankie had said about the origin of the grape as he sat the bottle back on the bar. What had just happened was quite the we saw that. Okay, yep, Once I'd asked Frankie to lend me some cash from that register. He growled so fierce that I decided not to ask again. I didn't think his employers would notice before I got it back, but maybe he just wanted to save me from myself. The worn stairs led to the outside world. Let's go. I was heading up the stairs when Frankie called after me. So what are you gonna do? I'd been thinking about Lil Fanny. I supposed even mobsters had people who cared about them, and she'd been wearing Lewis's old jacket, so perhaps Green and Lewis had been closer than I'd realized. I guess I'll take Connor Green's bait, I replied. I've got nothing better on the stove, and he might need the help. Something still stinks, though. Well, what's your plan? Frankie asked. The way I see it, I have 3 goals right now. Green hired me for a job. Find the guy who wrote the letter. That's the basic part. But you want more? Asked Frankie. I nodded. Green's a shady character. I have to learn about him. Who is this guy? Dig in his past. I can't go back to him blind. And then there's something about his bootlegging. How'd Green get a connection like that? What's his source exactly? Squeezing that lemon might give me more juice. That sounds alright, he replied. So where is it you're off to? I've got 3 leads. That bootlegger studio, who Green claims sent him the letter, the Tin Spoon Lounge, where I might learn more about Green's rum-running schemes, and Mrs. Green, who could give me more dirt on her husband. Frankie nodded his approval. Well, if you're ever stuck, come back and see me. You can never solve anything without talking it over. I smiled and went up the stairs.